Bam! Look at that. I'm going to give myself some claps and a ding. How are you
Super
feeling
clap
today,
for Super
Steven?
Joe Pardo for pronouncing my last name correctly.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So, Super Larry Roberts. Yes, Eric. I agree. He is in the house. I love this. Love the stars, Melanie. All right, Steven. How are you feeling this morning?
I'm feeling amazing, pumped up, super excited to get this information out there in front of people. How are you, Joe?
I'm feeling wonderful. I'm feeling inspired and like rethinking some of my strategies as far as going forward with turning IndiePod into its own business. So yeah, I'm loving it. I'm looking forward to what you got, Steven. And thank you for being a sponsor of this free Monetize Your Podcast conference brought to you by Blueberry. Like this is awesome. Thank you so much. Oh, by the way, you, Mr. Rapper, that was a very interesting video that you shared the other day.
Yeah, so I've been making rap music since I was about 14, and I'm actually about to release a full 13-track studio album on all places where you can buy music. So keep an eye out for that in the coming months.
Love it. I will be looking forward to it. All right, Steven, you're on the clock for 30 minutes. Looking forward to it, man. I'm going to share your screen now, and I'm going to get out of your way.
All right. So first of all, thank you so much for having me, Joe. My very first presentation I ever did in my life was last virtual conference here at the Independent Podcasters Conference. And the response was tremendously overwhelming. And I am just so excited and so honored to be back here a second time. And excuse me, before I get into this, I would like to open with a little bit of a story. And this is because over 2 years ago, when I started my podcast launch and production agency, I was researching all the tools that were possible for podcast hosting, podcast statistics, and so on. I looked into Liberated Syndication, Anchor, Blueberry, so on and so forth. And I really just needed the most powerful, all-encompassing tool that would give us as an agency the most control over our clients' podcast feed. And so Blueberry was that tool, right? So I've been using Blueberry for all our clients since day one, and we still are. And I totally had like a celebrity freak out moment only a couple of days ago when I saw that this was sponsored by Blueberry, and I'm actually speaking alongside the CEO of Blueberry Podcasting, the #1 podcasting, hosting, and statistics company. So this is freaking awesome, and I'm super stoked. With that being said, let's dive into this, right? Why monetizing your podcast is backwards. Why monetizing your podcast is backwards. So I know what you're thinking, right? That makes no sense. Don't be ridiculous, Steven. We're all here to monetize our podcasts. I get it. In fact, I've written this free ebook that you see on the right side called Podcast Cashflow Secrets. It doesn't have that many pages. It's only like 4 pages. It's not like a whole book, but hear me out. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I take no sadistic pleasure in being the conduit of truth that has to share this with you here today. However, the fact is, you are probably not going to take a hobbyist podcast that you're making in the corner of your garage and transform it into an ATM that's printing money overnight. I'm sorry, but it's probably not going to happen like that. Why? I'll explain in just a second. It's all about how we frame it. But first, I want to get into this case study. Okay. The story I shared earlier, excuse me, about my very first client in Q1 of 2018. This is that client. His name is Cameron Harold. He's the founder of COO Alliance, which is the world's #1 network for the second in command, whether that's chief operating officer, whether that's vice president, right? It's a corporate role. It's a senior executive leadership role, and he owns that niche. So Cameron has had tremendous results from his podcast, and I'd like to share them with you now. And these are all directly attributable to traffic, either guest traffic or listenership on his podcast. So over 6 figures in annual recurring revenue generated from actual COO Alliance memberships. It's a paid exclusive club. There's events, there's trainings, consultations, meetings, and all kinds of stuff. He's done over 5 figures in executive coaching services through his podcast. He's got to meet industry leading moguls like Grant Cardone Enterprises, VaynerMedia, Hal Elrod International. And he's become a best-selling author, not once, but 5 times over. And his podcast was a huge part of that strategy. Now, the one thing I'd like to make very clear about these results is that there's nothing inherently podcasty about them. In other words, any business could be producing these results without podcasting whatsoever, right? You don't need to be involved with the podcasting industry to, do these things. These are quantitative business results, right? However, in this case, podcasting was the vehicle. It was the marketing avenue that we used. So let's dive into that. The name of Cameron's podcast is Second in Command, the chief behind the chief. So he's got almost 250,000 unique listeners and counting, dozens of top 100 and top 200 Apple Podcast chart appearances in the coveted business section. Excuse me. And so I'm just going to toot my own horn for just a second here. But I just want to read this because it makes clear that the key to monetizing podcasts is not only the key that I'm about to show you, but it's in having a consistent, repeatable process, right? So he says, Stephen and his team are amazing. They've been with our podcast since day one, and we're now at 110 episodes that they've engineered for us. They've been instrumental in our success. His services as our audio engineer really helped us grow our audience and improve the quality of each episode. Stephen goes above and beyond with excellent service. And I'm actually going to introduce all of you to our team members later in this presentation. But for now, let's answer that question. Why is monetizing your podcast backwards? Well, it's very simple because you don't start with a podcast and say, how can I squeeze money out of this thing? That's the wrong approach. You start with a validated offer, a validated business offer, and you use your podcast as a marketing avenue, as a promotional tool, as a way to extend the reach and put your offer in front of more of the right people. So let's take a step back and a deep breath, mostly for my own sake. And let's dive a little bit into what a validated offer entails. All right. So it's got 3 pieces, 3 components, and they are having the right offer in front of the right people at the right price. When you align these 3 principles, what happens is people give you money in exchange for something. And this is called a validated offer because it's been proven to transact once these 3 things line up. So check this out. Let's back up a second because in that screenshot of Cameron's results, there were 3 validated offers that he had prior and independent to, in a sense, podcasting. The first one that we mentioned was a low ticket offer, which is his books. Now, those 5 books are an entry-level, low-ticket offer that's for all entrepreneurs. That's kind of the right people for that offer, right? And then his mid-ticket offer was the coaching, and that's for established businesses, And then finally, the high-ticket offer is only for corporations doing at least $5 million a year in revenue, and that's the COO Alliance exclusive membership. So again, the right offer in this case are the books, the coaching, and the COO Alliance. The right people in this case are all entrepreneurs, established businesses, and then 5 million plus corporations, right? And then, of course, the right price would be low ticket, mid ticket, and high ticket. So the point here is that he had already figured out, the right offer, the right people, and the right price for his business prior to deciding to launch a podcast, which means we could do it super strategically. But before we get into how he did it, I would like to show you how you can get crystal clear and what I mean when I say right offer, right people, and right price. So the right offer, in my opinion, should overlap with your zone of excellence. So, excuse me. Here's an activity that a dear friend of mine advised and guided me through about a little bit more than 7 years ago. Okay. The beginning of my entrepreneurship journey, I was like, bro, I'm looking for a job. Like, I need to pay my rent. And he's like, why are you looking for a job? Just find some clients. I'm like, well, first of all, that's a really cool way to reframe it. Second of all, how? Right? I had all this corporate work experience. And he says, well, I want you to make 3 lists. Okay, the first list is things you love to do, things that put you in that flow zone, that blackout state, and you're just, time flies, right? And you want to get really granular with all of these lists. You want to get real specific. They can be soft skills like conflict mediation, sales skills, etc. They can be hard skills, but you want to be real specific and, have as many items in these lists as possible. So things you love to do is the first list, right? Tasks, skills, from all your jobs even, or in your house, or when you were younger, right? And then the next list is what you've made money doing, things you've been paid to do before, right? So you go back to your jobs and you're like, okay, well, I entered spreadsheets, I managed clients, I answered phone calls, I organized emails, whatever the things that you've been paid to do are. Again, granular, specific tasks and skills. And then third list and final list is what you're great at. Excuse me. Like perhaps there's things that people who will say, you're so good at this. And you're like, I guess I don't care. Like, I don't love to do it, but I mean, I've always been good at it. Stuff like that. And there's probably going to be a lot of overlap with the other 2 lists. And that's the point now, right? Because what will happen is that you will notice certain things appearing, overlapping in multiple lists. Like, for instance, if we saw that like data entry, working with spreadsheets, organizing emails, answering phone calls, networking with people were all things that, fit the middle of this Venn diagram for you, then you might be a great executive assistant. Excuse me. And your right offer could be like, hey, I want to be an EA to an established entrepreneur, and I've got the chops to prove it. So that's a general idea and an example on how you can start to get clear on what it is that you can offer people right now today from a business standpoint. And you're going to be offering it to the right people. This is commonly referred to as your ideal client avatar. These are people that need your skills, and they've got some specific particular pain point. Like in the example of executive assistant, how many entrepreneurs are strapped for time? Their email inbox is overcrowded. Their scheduling's a mess. And those are pain points that you could, address with your executive assistant offer. Be like, hey, look, I love to be an EA. I love these things. I'm great at these things. I've been paid to do these things. Let's work, right? So you want to get really inside their head. How do they talk? What do they value? How do they interact with social media? Where are they on social media? Things like this, okay? There's all kinds of resources out there for ideal client avatar stuff. This particular presentation is not one of them, but this should help you understand that there's got to be some alignment between the offer and the people, and that alignment is kind of the pain point. And finally, and thank goodness, this is the simplest and easiest and most direct one to answer. You've got the right price, which is quite simply whichever fee nets you the most profit. Okay, whichever fee nets you the most profit. And there's lots of ways to do this, right? There's many paths to one end. So a real simple, generalized rule of thumb way might be charge as much as people will pay, and just raise your prices. And as long as people are still paying you, that's great. And this actually kind of works in a sense, right? It'll bring your margins up. It will attract the best clients for you. eventually, if you really want to dominate a market and you really want to, capture a niche and sustain that niche and grow it, then you need to start analyzing data and testing different prices. But in general, whichever price makes you the most money is the right price, okay? Because a healthy business is measured by profit. Your impact, your potential is all measured by your profit. So as we saw, Cameron Herold had 3 validated offers. So now is the juicy meat and potatoes time, where we are going to dive into the actual strategies that Cameron used to take his podcast and blow up those 3 offers. So the first one we mentioned was the low ticket, which was the books. So Cameron's written 5 books, and we've been producing episodes for over 2 years. When we started, I think his second book had just came out. Long story short, we've always had a link to his latest book on Amazon in the show notes. And we found one of the highest converting link texts is quite simply, order meetings suck on Amazon, click here. Or order free PR on Amazon, click here. They're all priced right under the $10 mark. And again, the key tie-in here between that and the podcasting is that these books are for, right, the ideal client for these books is any entrepreneur who's into self-development. And so we strategically make a podcast where the ideal listener of the podcast is any entrepreneur who's into self-development, so that we can convert these hundreds and thousands of unique listeners into book sales, right? So the ideal listener can drive everything else. It can drive who your guests are, what topics you're talking about. It can drive how long, how frequent, how your artwork looks, right? So think about how powerful it is. Just start with a validated offer, turn it into an ideal listener, and then build a podcast around attracting that ideal listener. I hope that makes sense. Give me one quick second. Okay, great. So let's go into the mid-ticket now here. This is the second strategy. And the second thing we mentioned was that Cameron's able to obtain coaching clients as podcast guests. Let me rephrase that. He attracts his ideal coaching client prospect as a podcast guest. Roughly half of his guests fit this criteria. They're not yet clients of his. However, think about this. If his podcast is exclusively for chief operating officers and second in commands, and Cameron himself has a whole history of being a chief operating officer and rapidly growing and scaling businesses, that means that he's inviting people onto his podcast that he can really help. These are folks that might be doing 10 million a year, and Cameron can scale them up, right? So if you have a mid-level service that can really help a person, make a podcast that's valuable to that person. And what's interesting is I mentioned half of Cameron's podcast guests are already in COO Alliance high ticket membership offer, and half of Cameron's guests are not. Okay. We're talking about the high ticket COO Alliance now. Now understand how pitching coaching is valuable for both of these populations. If you're not in his high ticket offer, he can pitch you on coaching and you'll get so much value. Be like, wow, Cameron, you just fixed 3 major ceilings in my operations and I just scaled up. I would love to join COO Alliance, right? And for the folks that are in COO Alliance, he has special coaching programs and special coaching opportunities. So either way, right, he's able to essentially pitch a mid-ticket service to his podcast guests. And in fact, it's 2 separate populations in his podcast guests, as I've explained, folks that are already in his program and folks that aren't. But they both get a unique over delivery of value by working with Cameron. So that kind of leads us right into the third strategy, which is, again, half his guests are in the high ticket service here that we're about to talk about. So the way it benefits folks that are already in COO Alliance is that his podcast positions them as peers of VaynerMedia, as peers of of Grant Cardone, as peers of Hal Elrod, because they've been featured on this, leading COO podcast alongside some of the greatest companies in the world. So it's a value wall, right? Like, join my membership group and you'll get to be featured on this tremendous top ranked podcast, right? And that's for the guests that are already in COO Alliance. And again, the guests that are not in COO Alliance, it's quite simple, are the perfect prospects for it. So because you have a top ranked podcast, you are able to invite your ideal prospects, and they're very likely to say yes. Even Gary Vee and these huge names say yes to almost any podcasting opportunity because it's evergreen advertising content and you're putting your voice and face in front of aligned people. So essentially, Cameron can say, hey, I would love to have you on my show. And in that hour of shining a spotlight on their story, right? And he's already done the research knowing that this person could really use his help. They're at the level, so-and-so. After an hour of shining a spotlight on their story, Cameron has built so much know, like, and trust that, that person's very willing to sit there and chat and have a conversation about what he offers. So, I hope that gets your wheels turning about like next level monetization strategies, thinking like a marketer, thinking like a psychologist, thinking about how you can double dip with who you're attracting as guests and double dip with who you're attracting as listeners, right? So again, entry level offers, medium ticket offers, high ticket offers. How is this going to interface with who you're attracting as guests and listeners? So it all comes down to starting with that validated offer. If you really want to make money with your podcast, 6+ figures like Cameron has in a little over 2 years, this is the way to do it. Start with those validated offers and then build the podcast around it. So that's kind of the general point I'd like to drive home here. So a little bit about who we are. Now, look, the reason I'm able to be in front of you today and do these speeches and prepare these slides and share this value is because, by the grace of God, I have an incredible team of human beings that back me up, an incredible leadership team. So I feel indebted to them and I would like to give them special shout outs here. So Sami, helps people that are interested in our services discover if it's a fit, but she's also like the behind the scenes marketing genius. She is the reason that Golden Ticket podcast production stays ahead of the curve. She helps our clients also be really, really creative and original and unique in how they are marketing things, even sometimes on a month-to-month basis. So she's awesome. Thank you, Sami. We love you. Melanie Harrington is the owner and founder of Stardust Graphics, and she does all of our in-house website development, graphic design, branding, logos. And so if you need any of that stuff, highly, highly, highly recommend that you go to stardust.graphics. I know it's a weird website, and like I wasn't even sure what she meant when she told me that. I was like, wait, your website is stardust.graphics? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, well, but if you type it in, you'll see. So very special shout out to Dua Khan. Dua is the director of operations, so she oversees the entire ongoing production piece as well as the ongoing content highlight repurposing pieces of the business. And she's really the magic glue that holds everything together. She is an absolute unicorn of a staff member, and she's the reason that I'm so happy and our clients are so happy and our whole team is so happy. So if you would like to work with any of us or talk to us, feel free to reach out. In fact, we are at famouspodcasts.com. You could also email me directly, Steven@famouspodcasts.com. We've got a form there, whatever questions, concerns you have. We offer podcast strategy consultations. We offer done for you, white glove podcast launch and production. And that's it. That's all I've got for the folks today, Joe. How did I do on timing, brother?
You're doing well. It's there's like 6.5 minutes left.
All right, so perhaps we could take some questions. Perhaps you could there we go. Take questions. we could like chop it up about something.
Yeah, no, I haven't figured it out yet. Or even if you think you have figured it out, but you're like, I'm not getting the traction I thought I was. I mean, look, that's why I've changed changed my show up over the years, 6 years. So it happens. It happens. Like we think and here's the other thing is sometimes we don't know who our audience is going to wind up being, right? Like we started out with like, oh, we're gonna make this show for this X type of person, and then we end up attracting the complete opposite of that. Like, oh, we're making it for men, but it's all women that end up listening to it. Or we thought we were making it for like 18 to 24-year-olds, maybe 25-year-olds. But all of a sudden it's like 30 and 40 or 50-year-olds who are trying to figure out, like, get in on what's going on with those 18s, 14s, right? Because they're like,
yeah.
And so we had this talk. I talked to, I forget who I talked to about this week. It came up this week about, like you think like it's not sometimes about what the show is about. It's about what the demographic's about too, right? Like, especially if you're trying to go from like an ad revenue standpoint, like they don't, the people that want to advertise don't necessarily care what it's about. They want to reach that specific demographic for a specific reason because that's where their target is. So, there's a lot to think about when you're trying to put this all, put it all together and make it make sense. It can be kind of daunting.
And I would love to share a quick tip with the time that I've got left, a quick bonus tip. If you've got an email list for your podcast, which you should if you don't. So I guess that's step one is figure out. I mean, for instance, if you're driving traffic from your podcast to a specific page, like your website /podcast or something where it's a unique offer for your podcast people where they put their email in. That's an easy way to get an email list of your podcast subscribers and then do a survey, right? And so surveys are so powerful for figuring out who you're talking to. And I like to keep it between like 3 and 5 questions. The subject line is always framed as a value add, right? So it's like, I'm going to tell you what the latest trends in podcasting are. All you have to do is fill the survey out. It takes less than 60 seconds. It's like 3 quick questions, and I will give you the answers, and you'll see exactly, who else is listening to my show, right? So I've done surveys for media, real estate, almost every industry, and I can't see why it would not be a massive hit here with podcasting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is knowing your audience. So true, Joe Pardo. Know who you're talking to, and what's important to them. Absolutely. And Melanie says a survey. Yeah, I mean, if you have an email, you start building that email list. That's like the number one thing you could do right out of the gate, right? Build either an email list, a Facebook group, some way to like pull people in so you can keep feeding them the information to them, right? Website name of podcast. Awesome. I'm not even sure who's saying that.
I think that person was referring to, so I think these comments are delayed and that person was referring to my comment about having a specific landing page just for, that you would put in every single show notes, go here for your free 2 gifts for my podcast fans, boom, there's your email list.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And like I said, it's so important to have an email list. Start building it yesterday, and just so you have a way to collect people in and into your group and be able to feed them the newest information and newest things that you got going on. You don't own your followers. No, you don't. They can hit the unsubscribe button. They can leave your group. They can.
Right. That's the key.
What's that thing called? A restraining order. Yeah, they can do that, right? Like that's a thing. Oh well, I forgot to give StreamYard the okay permission. Yes, go to streamyard.com/Facebook to get yourself the permission so we can see who's commenting here. Melanie says like stardust.graphics/podcast. Yeah, I mean that's one way. I mean we do indiepodcasters.com/listen. So you go there and like all of the shows or all the episodes are there. So yeah. So, well, Steven, thank you so much, not only for being here, not only for giving a great talk, but thank you so much for sponsoring this event. We greatly appreciate it. And if you want to say thank you to Steven or me or any of the other speakers coming up, go to indiepodcasters.com/donate and hit one of the donate buttons there for HopeWorks in Camden, Give Kids the World, Dope doing our part eclectically over here in Philly, feeding the homeless, or donate to your own cause that you want to support, and bring it over and put it in the comments on the indiepodcasters.com/donate. Steven Sapphic, right?
Yes, you said it perfectly. Again, it's been a real honor and pleasure becoming friends with you. I think you're awesome. I think you got a great heart. I don't know how you went for 8 hours straight, bro. That was insane. The other day, 8 hours straight.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing 6 today, and 2 weeks from now we'll probably be doing close to 6 to 8 hours again. So, and doing it daily. So it's
you got tons of content.
Fun.
Tons of content that you could repurpose. Tons of it. It's awesome.
It is being repurposed. It's being repurposed into LinkedIn and to YouTube, all my YouTube channels, youtube.com/superjoeparty. You should totally go check that out, hit that subscribe. I'm trying to get to like 400, 500 subscribers. We're at 360, 359, something like that. So,
I think I subscribed on all 3 of my YouTube accounts.
Bam. Thank you so much, Steven.
My honor, bro.
All right, everybody, I need super claps in the chat for Super Steven Sapphic. Take care, Steven.
You too, man.